Dietitians podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today for what is yet again another episode. And as always, you're joined by your trio of hosts, Jack Radford-Smith, Damian Cox, and Tiara Nelson. It is great to be back for another episode. And today we are going to be talking about a number of topics, pretty related to the bodybuilding scene, particularly because this time of year, a lot of shows are starting to wrap up. And I think that these topics are incredibly relevant for a lot of competitors who have perhaps just finished their season. So we are going to start off with this very first question, diving right in. It says, is it possible to maintain a comp lean physique year round? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Short answer or the long answer?
I mean, the short answer of pure dietitian fashion is it depends. But I think for most people, it would be a flat out no for a number of reasons, both physiological and psychological. So we can touch on a number of those points today and give people the long answer for sure. So I think, there's a number of places that I'd start with. And first of all would be how someone feels. Like, how do you genuinely feel at the end of your comp prep from like a food focused perspective, a energy level perspective, a training performance perspective, a social perspective? And do you really want to carry those feelings or those tendencies into a more chronic setting and basically maintain those things indefinitely? Because yes, there are a number of aspects which would improve with more food, like towards the end of a comp prep when you are very, very lean. And for many competitors, like for a male, that would mean sub 10% body fat. A lot of the negative symptoms that you're facing are tied to the body composition that you're at. Like, yes, there are going to be some things that are maybe tied to the lower intake of food, which would gradually improve with a larger intake of food at maintenance. But maybe you might get a 10% improvement, you might get a 15, 30% improvement, but you're still going to be in a compromised position. And I think that would be doubly reinforced hormonally as well. Like, you're going to be maintaining a body composition that is not conducive for good hormonal health. And especially as natural competitors, like, we want to rebound appropriately and rebound positively in the sense of having good hormone status. But there's so many other things to consider as well. Like, I mean, Damien, I know you can resonate with this probably personally because you're going through it at the moment. But yeah, almost putting yourself in that, let's say you did want to maintain a comp lean physique year round, fully striated glutes. What would that mean to you in terms of carrying over some negative aspects indefinitely? It probably doesn't sound very enticing for you.
Yeah, not at all. It's, I guess, like you kind of mentioned, it's those other hormonal side effects that start to come in. Like, sure, it's the hunger, it's the lethargy, it's the energy levels, but, the low libido as well, the irritableness from day to day. I guess even if we were to look at the other aspects of training as well, like being bodybuilders and wanting to, we bodybuild to go to the gym, to build muscle, to have great training sessions, and that can be severely impacted at this kind of body composition as well. So, and trying to maintain that all year round, and I guess then you would probably be maintaining muscle rather than gaining muscle, which, again, as bodybuilders, that's what we're wanting to do in the long term is to gain. So I guess there's even that caveat as well of that being impacted at this current body composition. So yeah, it's the short answer, as you kind of said, ideally not, but it definitely can depend potentially even on, I guess, what your idea of comp lean physique is. I guess, like you mentioned, striated glutes and that bodybuilding composition of being extremely lean probably isn't ideal to be, to maintain that body composition level all year round. However, potentially with other competitors who aren't getting as lean as that, potentially could maintain at a slightly higher body composition. But again, it's very, very context dependent.
I think that there's that old classic saying that goes something along the lines of, if the methods that you employed to achieve your results, they're unsustainable and unmaintainable, well, then you just need to be at peace with the fact that then those results are unsustainable and unmaintainable. If you think back to all of the things that you've been doing over these past number of months while you've been chronically dieting toward this very specific physique to present under very specific circumstances on a given day, if you really ask yourself honestly, you're like, man, all of the things that I've done, all of the time and effort that I've invested into this, potentially a lot of the things that you've sacrificed in other areas of life, if that's unsustainable and unmaintainable for you long term, well then, holding on to that physique, it's unsustainable and unmaintainable. And you just have to accept that. But I'm really happy that we're hitting home the fact of it's not just about a look. It's about what comes with the territory of that look in the terms of how you actually feel. And you have to ask yourself, are you actually thriving as a human being? The answer is probably no, not to my fullest capacity. And guys, you have to remember too, is that even if you aren't maintaining that super wicked comp-lean physique where, you've just got veins running up your pelvis, up into your chest, and, you've got striations upon striations in your delts and all these splits in your quads. And yeah, it's that looks pretty cool, but, not being able to maintain and sustain that, indefinitely, it's not going to make anyone else think any less of you. I would really hope that you and everyone in your circle, whether that's your family, your friends, your partner, your peers, they loved you, including you loved you just as much, prior to getting shredded. So just because you won't be looking quite as diced, it doesn't make you any less of a person. It shouldn't make you think any less of yourself either. I think it probably a pretty good analogy for this, in terms of trying to sustain a comp lean physique and, beating yourself up about it because, you can't keep every single line in your butt cheek. It's can you guys think back to when we were in university and remember SWAT vac, right? That week before, then you go into that 2-week really gnarly period of doing all of your exams and you feel like your head is going to explode because you have so much information in terms of all of these anatomy courses that you're studying and biochemistry and this, that, and the other, right? You are right on the brink of being able to just let this all loose onto these exam papers in your highest hopes to get 7s. But then, you have to think about what was I actually doing in that week, right? I was constantly reading books and going through flashcards and doing practice exams. And I really didn't have time for anything else in my life. Then I did the exam, and I got the result and I got the 7 and it's woohoo. But afterwards, are you going to put all this pressure on yourself to continuously remember every single bone in the human body and every single nerve and muscle and all of those freaking different components of the Krebs cycle? You'll be no, I understand the bare bones of it. I get the gist of it, right? But I don't need to, maintain that information to my head to such the extent that I go crazy and I have no other mental capacity for life. So I think that's a little bit of an analogy there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would sum it up by saying you would be surviving but not thriving. And I think it's important to address maybe some practical points or goal setting and think about what matters most to you in that post-show phase. And for example, competitors maybe finish a comp season and just feel a bit dissociated from the gym, whereas other competitors step off and they're wow, I'm ready for my next season. I want to make improvements. So really reflecting on how you feel post-comp, whether you've got that competitive spirit and you've got that internal drive of improving. And I would use whatever goal comes to mind or use your frame of mind to kind of set some goals. I think goal setting post-comp is very, very useful, very beneficial because it gives structure, it gives drive, both internal and external drive. So that could be anywhere from, okay, I want to perform better in the gym again. I want to get that mojo back in the gym and build muscle, and that can reinforce that, okay, I'm not going to sustain or maintain this physique in order to achieve that. Or maybe it could be something different, maybe you have business goals and you're okay, I had to put my business or these commitments on the back burner while I was in comp prep, and in order to perform cognitively at my best and sort of build a business or maintain a business, I want to give back to my body and give back to my mind and be able to perform or function at my best. So yeah, I think there definitely is a trade-off. And as Damien said, it really depends on the category as well. And it also may not be as far from stage weight as you think that you may start feeling normal or be normal. Often what I find is that people will probably need to recover first and get gain weight intentionally in a post-show phase. And the leaner you get, probably the more weight you will need to gain post-comp. But I think people maybe think in extremes and be like, okay, it's either I'm going to be completely comp prep shredded, or I'm going to be like 30%
Peak off
body fat.
season.
Yeah, like there is a middle ground there. Like, and
Before I even knew what bodybuilding was, do I just divert immediately back to that? There's no in between. I think that is such a good point to cover because, yeah, just because you're not maintaining that shredded comp lean physique, it doesn't mean that you can't still stay within somewhat of a striking distance to your show weight. And that doesn't mean, necessarily doing a Jack Radford Smith and doing a 3-week prep and winning a pro card. Most of us aren't quite on that level. But it still means that, a striking distance perhaps is like a few kilograms, depending on you as an individual, above that stage weight. And I think for a lot of people, when they're on the downward trend, right, in terms of like they're going from their peak improvement season and they're just commencing their comp prep, let's say that that's going to be a 6-month diet in duration. You've probably got somewhere in the territory of, maybe, again, depending on the person, the category, let's say 8 to 12 kilograms to lose in terms of body weight. You take that at around the 50% mark on average. Most competitors are going to be communicating with their coaches. This might still be a number of months out from show, but they might have actually lost a few kilograms in that process, you'd hope. But let's say that they're hovering somewhere around 4 to 6 kilos above their stage weight, right? But they've already lost maybe 4 to 6 kilos in the process. They communicate, hey, coach, listen, like, I know I'm dieting right now. I know I've been in a deficit for a number of months, but like, I actually feel pretty freaking good. Like, sure, like when it's mealtime, I'm hungry, but I'm not like food focused out of my mind. I'm still sleeping really well at night. I'm still performing really well in the gym. Like, I have high drive. I have high libido. Like, mentally, I'm really switched on. Like, I feel good. I feel comfortable in my clothes. I'm confident. I have high self-esteem. Like, this is good. I reckon I could maintain this. And you could probably back that up and to be like, yeah, I think realistically you could probably maintain this too. Especially if it's like a female, she still is regularly having her menstrual cycle. If you were to take blood work on a guy, it's like, yeah, your testosterone isn't tanked. So using that as a bit of a reference point for someone to be like, hey, if we get you back up to this point post-comp, this is a position where you probably could thrive pretty sustainably, eating, a decent amount of food, fueling your training performance, feeling great in your mind and your body and your physique. Like really, you are in a prime position, but you have to take note of that point. And then again, see if you can obviously land the plane there post-comp.
Yeah, I think there's a number of points there which I'd speak to, but I overarchingly agree with you for sure. Like, the number that comes to mind for me is like 10%. If I had to give someone a number, it would maybe like be around 10% up on stage weight. Again, depending on how lean you got. So if someone competed at 50 kilos, maybe it's possible to do 55. But again, I don't like giving those objective numbers because it really depends on, as you said, Sarah, like what does your blood work look like? What does those other subjective scores look like? Is your menstrual cycle returned? If you're a guy, do you have great libido? Do you have vitality? All those points. So, and I think, as I was alluding to before, coming up maybe a bit higher in weight, fully recovering, and then coming back down again, if you did want to maintain a certain look, is probably a better move, because on the way down, as you said, Tierra, like you probably feel better in those positions because you're still fully recovered on the way down. Like you're not, it's like that sweet spot before you then edge into the territory of, okay, I'm now physiologically compromised. So there's probably going to be a period where you come up, recover, and then at that point you kind of have the luxury of what you want to do next. But I think it's important to consider, as there's the majority of, or many people listening to this are bodybuilders, like if you did want to maintain something leaner year round, like you may have to accept that there's going to be less improvements. And Damien alluded to that at the beginning, because I think a period of a controlled energy surplus is important. And in order to gain muscle maximally, that can mean that you have a tighter range, though. Again, it doesn't mean you suddenly have to be 30% body fat in the off season as a guy, or whatever, like the equivalent for females. Like it might mean that, okay, I go from 12% to 16% body fat in the off season. And I think a good reframe as well from a body composition standpoint is, people automatically think they'll look worse with more body weight. Like, yes, there will probably be a disproportionate period post show where your body is gaining weight in different places, and that may be different than what you're used to. It may mean a little bit more central adiposity or central weight gain, which will then even out. And I think a lot of people get a bit shocked or surprised or disheartened by that. But again, it's purely our evolutionary physiology of wanting to have a bit more cushioning through the midsection. Genetics will influence that as well. But as you recover, as you essentially even things out over time, like body fat will readjust and adapt. And people often go back and forth, or does your body fat storage change? It may change subtly, but in my experience, it doesn't change drastically. It comes back on slightly disproportionately initially, but then it definitely does even out. And yeah, so those would be points I'd make.
Yeah, and there's no denying that it can feel very uncomfortable, especially when you are going through a chronic dieting stint of like 6+ months. And you recognize that over time, you're like, man, my waistline, it just keeps getting more snatched and snatched and snatched, and it keeps getting smaller. Well, the two primary reasons for that is that, interestingly enough, when we're actually dieting and our like energy is scarce and our body's like, man, I need to extract calories from something, like, interestingly enough, you don't just lose mass off, body fat stores, right, subcutaneously, but your visceral fat as well, which means that the essential amount of fat around your vital organs, like your liver and your kidneys and your intestine, hell, even your heart, your body will start to eat away at that. And of course, that's going to shrink in size, but it's not just the visceral fat, but it's also the smooth muscle around your vital organs as well. If your body recognizes that over a very long stint of time, there's less overall calories coming in, but there's also less food volume coming in as well, then it's like, well, I don't really need quite as much smooth muscle around this small intestine. So it actually starts to get smaller too. So that's why like our waistlines, they really come in. But then post-comp, the combination of your body's like, whoa, okay, I need a visceral fat around my organs. I need, to actually have a little bit more smooth muscle around my intestines and my other vital organs as well. But also, if you have more food coming in terms of calories, but more food volume as well, that naturally will obviously, add to your total waistline and your midsection. But relatively to what you probably experienced in the past or had in the past, it's still super small, but it's just the case of like, because it's so different, it feels uncomfortable no matter who you are. You can still look fantastic, but you just, if you feel a little bit different, there's no denying that it still feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, moving on to another topic that we have here, I think it segues nicely because there may be a few different camps of people post show. Like camp one might be, okay, I really want to maintain this lean physique. And they might try and do that, and it creates very disordered eating because they're essentially trying to maintain something that isn't healthy mentally and physically. On the other side, there might be people who are like, okay, like that's literally the least of my worries is maintaining a comp lean physique. Like I'm really struggling with overeating here or binge eating, and they're just fighting tooth and nail to resist overeating. And they couldn't care less about their body image, or maybe their body image is feeding into that. So it just goes to show that there's so many different things here that could be creating either a positive or negative environment around food. And this is kind of our next topic, is like tips and advice for how to resist overeating during your recovery phase. And there's quite a lot to dig into here, both from like a mental and a physical standpoint. And I can speak to a few points, and then we can maybe go from there. I'll set the scene maybe from I guess a psychological and physiological standpoint, because I think that's important to give people a bit of background as to like why resisting that urge to overeat is kind of pretty normal in the post-show phase, and then we can dig into from there. So I think setting the scene, like you're entering the post-show period from a scarcity mindset or a scarcity physiological standpoint as well. Like you've just done months of restriction. And to analogize this in a fairly cliche fashion, like back to evolution or caveman times, like let's say someone has like survived through the winter on nuts and berries, and they're in their cave and they're just surviving. Like that's their main goal, is surviving in that time.
But they ain't thriving.
Yes. Looks like I've coined that phrase. And then suddenly, the snow thaws or the ice melts, and they're able to hunt some bigger game. They hunt a woolly mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger, and they're able to gorge and feed themselves and have a huge amount of protein and fat. And it's very much a scarcity mindset or physiological state that the body is still in. Like the body suddenly doesn't be like, oh, we're in a new season. Don't worry, there's going to be plenty of food around. You're going to be okay. The body doesn't know that. It doesn't think like that. It purely reacts to the biological conditions that it's under. And it's the same post show where your body doesn't know that, okay, you went on stage on the weekend and you're now, okay, coach has said it's the recovery phase now, I can just relax and everything's going to be okay. Your body doesn't know that. It needs time, and your mind also needs time to restore those cues. And I'm sure people who have competed before have noticed this, where like every week post show you might feel it a slightly different way. For me, what I notice quite starkly is like my connection with people. Like when you're post show or in prep, towards the end, like your social interaction with people is quite different in terms of it may be a little more terse, or you might be a bit more dissociated from a conversation, or you might not be able to emotionally connect with people on the same level. And then it's almost like once more energy are restored, like you get a bit more capability or function for that. But it could be analogized for anything like sleep gets better, just daily energy levels get better. But I guess coming back to the concept of overeating, like physiologically, you're still in a scarcity state, and mindset wise, you're still in a scarcity state as well of coming off like a period of drastic restriction.
But of course, apart from physiology, like psychology would play an enormous role in this, in terms of how you are going to handle yourself post show and how you're going to prepare yourself. And I think there's just something to be said for living the human experience, because you can go into a comp prep or, and some sort of dieting phase, and you can listen to every single podcast under the sun prior. You can have the best coach in the world. You can have all these people trying to give you a heads up and tips and advice, and listen to all the YouTube videos, hear that and the other. But if you have never actually experienced what it's like for yourself, to go through a really gnarly dieting phase, get super duper lean, and then the aftermath of that, actually dealing with that sort of hunger, like it just goes without saying, you are probably going to have some sort of experience in your life where you do feel a little bit out of control. You are in some sort of environment where food is in abundance and you do start to eat. And then it goes from, man, this is like, tasting really good, to you reach a point where you're like, this isn't fun anymore. But you continue engaging in that behavior anyway, and you just keep gorging yourself and eating, and you don't fully understand, but you have to go through that experience. I'm under the impression, at least once in your life, to truly understand, like, whoa, all right, this doesn't make me feel very good. Like, I feel physically sick and I don't feel good about myself. And this is not the way that I actually want to be treating myself. This is not a sign of self-respect, right? And whether you go through that once or whether you go through that 3 times, whether it lasts, a day or a week or a month, hell, even years, it does get to some point where you just have to recognize that, like, you are the only one in control of how much you actually choose to eat, and at the end of the day, you're the only one that can actually stop that behavior yourself. But I think it definitely comes with, going through that experience, and then being able to know how to, like, psychologically handle yourself. And you might look at, people who are further down the track, right? Who are different stages in their journey. For example, in past podcasts, from the OG TBD episodes, Jack and I talked at length about how prior to us ever even getting involved in the bodybuilding industry, we went through our own personal struggles. We went through our own years of having very disordered eating habits, orthorexic tendencies, trying to, maintain these much leaner physiques while not eating a hell of a lot of food. And Jack, you and I both went through our years of, basically binging and restricting, right? And it was really difficult to overcome. But because we went through that and we overcame it in those years prior to ever getting involved in bodybuilding, then it almost gave us a little bit of a personal psychological advantage to be like, whoa, okay, like post show, I'm not going to eat my heart out, because I know from past experiences that that does not make me feel very good. But if you've never had that sort of experience before prior to getting involved in bodybuilding, I just have to say, like, you probably have to experience it like at least once, and some sort of uncontrollable overeating episode where you're like, yeah, no, not again.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes it might not be choice, of course. Like, I think there are some strategies that we can talk about to help with that. And I think, again, addressing both kind of psychological and physiological components there, but I think it was really well said. Like, yeah, we both struggled with, like, when we give these strategies, like, I think it's important that we say that, yeah, we've struggled with things ourselves, and a lot of these strategies are lived experience from what we've used or what we've had success with from clients, and also, of course, being backed up by science and evidence base around addressing kind of physiological and psychological components. So one thing that I think is worthwhile post show is to purely more so address hunger, is not being scared to continue to volumize your food and have high protein as well. Like, we know that protein is very, very satiating, most satiating macronutrient, plus also just having fibrous food, having food that occupies more volume or takes longer to digest, like addressing hunger cues through that is going to be good, because again, your body is still going to be giving you those hunger cues. Like, even if you do gain a good amount of weight fairly quickly, and we often reference like around 5 to 10% of your stage weight gained back in the first kind of 4 to 8 weeks, even if you do gain 10% back in 4 weeks, like you probably still are going to be pretty damn hungry, because it's going to take some time for your leptin and ghrelin to catch up. So ghrelin being your appetite or hunger hormone, and then leptin being your sort of satiation cue hormone. And leptin is very much correlated with body fat. So there might be a window, and this is more so for, I think it's important for people to reflect on why am I overeating? For some people, it may be purely physiological. I know for me, it's more so physiological, where my body just recognizes that it's very lean still. I want to eat everything in sight. So what do? I just make sure that I have very satiating meals still. And personally, I'm not as concerned about palatability. I just want to eat. So whether that's a salad or whether that's a burger, like I'd choose the salad just to have more volume. Or maybe there's a middle ground for someone where they have a homemade burger or a burger wrap, but they have like 600-gram salad along with that. So you kind of help to balance things out. And you may just have to let physiology catch up. Like, your physiology needs to catch up, and that's going to be time related. But you need to give your physiology the best fighting chance, and part of that is going to be gaining the appropriate amount of weight back afterwards, because your body needs that weight to be able to restore those physiological cues. But psychologically, like, that's a different ballgame altogether. And again, I think it comes back to reflecting on maybe what is causing overeating. Is it you have a social event and people are pressuring you? Is it that you're comparing yourself to other people post-show and they're posting all their shredded photos, or they're saying, wow, I've gained 1 kilo back in 6 weeks. Like, how good am I? And there can definitely be a concept of sort of looking down on yourself negatively, but I'd remind yourself that you have no idea what these people are facing. Like, the individual who still looks shredded post-show, like, one, they could just be posting photos from when they were like 1 day post-show, or they could be feeling absolute crap because they still feel exactly how they did 1 week out, where they're basically compromised in every sense of the word.
Or I think some people, they just, manicure some sort of story in their head about other people that they are complete strangers on social media. And like you said, that point of comparison, it's like, what? But I saw that they went out on Friday night and they posted this photo of them smiling with a burger next to their face. But then, the next morning they showed some picture of them doing a workout in the gym and they still have abs. That's not fair, because I went out for a burger with my family and the next morning I couldn't see my abs. So it's like, guys, this is all just smoke and mirrors. But on the flip side too, I think a lot of people, they compare themselves to others who it's like, wow, it looks like they're successfully having some sort of flexible reverse, whereas I'm really trying my absolute best to incorporate more of that quote unquote moderation, more of the social events, following along with my reverse plan, but I don't look like them, right? But it's like, you don't even know if they look like them.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to tips and advice for how to resist overeating during your recovery phase, I think this is where it's really beneficial to still fall back on some of those habits and behaviors and disciplines that you employed during your comp prep that you really helped to manage your hunger during the comp prep. And you have to remember, you're just coming off the back end of months of dieting, and you would have employed so many of these different little tactics and skills when you were eating significantly less food, right? So now, what's the reason why you can't still use those to your advantage to actually help manage your hunger levels post comp? And I think that's really, really a good strategy in terms of, okay, I still have meals throughout the day that are evenly spaced, but I'm still eating at regular meal times so that my digestive system, my psychology, my routine, I know what to expect. I'm still, gravitating toward these higher volume food sources so that I actually feel properly satiated and properly nourished during the day as well. I'm still being fairly disciplined in terms of like when I eat, what I eat, like the environment that I'm eating in as well. And you just have to think back to like when you were in prep, let's say that you were having like a string of 6 low days and then your coach gave you one high day where maybe like your carbohydrates doubled on that day and you went maybe even just slightly closer up to your maintenance. You might have still been in a slight calorie deficit, right? Psychologically, you're like, woo, refeed Saturday, let's freaking go, right? Psychologically, you feel on top of the world, right? Because you convinced yourself that I have more food, I can train harder, I'm not nearly as hungry. But then if you reframe it to be like, okay, post comp, you know how you used to feel on a refeed day, right? That's going to be you every single day of the week. That's you having that abundance of food and energy in your body every day of the week, plus a little bit more, because the goal isn't for you to still be in a slight deficit or even at maintenance. You're actually in a slight surplus. So if you can psychologically reframe it like that to be like, whoa, I did the tough stuff. I went 6 months like dieting in an energy deprived state. And then, I was still trying to reach peak performance in the gym, right? Like that's the thing. When you're a bodybuilder, to maintain your muscle mass and just capitalize on body fat, you are literally trying your absolute best to, maintain peak performance while you are in a chronic deficit. Like that's freaking tough. So who's to say that post comp, you still can't like apply all of these things that helped manage your hunger while you were actually dieting to help manage your hunger while you actually have a little bit more food on board?
Yeah, I think.
I think you guys have. Sorry, Jack. I think you guys have covered the strategies in and around nutrition really nicely. Jack, you mentioned around, that volumizing foods, higher protein intakes here, like commenting on using kind of similar strategies that you've used during prep to then, help manage those post-show kind of hunger things as well. But I guess I'd probably come at it from maybe even a slightly different angle in terms of, surrounding yourself with, if possible, especially with, even maintaining your coach post comp as well, and having that communication there with, friends and family, especially in and around those social occasions you might have, birthdays planned or social events planned that you may not have been able to do in prep that involve food. And having those sorts of conversations with the people around you, friends, family, your coach, around how to manage that, how you will be thinking during those times, whether we need to have strategic nutrition, planned in and around those particular events or days, or, having sort of plans in place around those times to potentially, reduce the side effect of potentially overeating at those events. But I think the biggest thing is the constant communication with those sorts of people to say, this is how I am feeling at the moment post-comp. I'm not feeling great. Like I'm still really, really hungry. My appetite's still through the roof. I still hasn't physiologically recovered appropriately yet. Having those sorts of conversations to, then be able to reflect back during those times and say, whether there is a family or a loved one, need to say, how do you feel during this time with this amount of food, with all these things going on? Are you okay? Having that kind of, back person there to have that support. And again, I emphasize staying, with the coach, and hopefully your coach is very supportive during this time, but, constantly checking in, whether it is during the check-ins or having that constant communication of being, having them there during that time, I think would be really, really beneficial for anyone going through this phase for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt, just speak up no matter how you're feeling.
Mm.
Like a coach is never there to judge you. They are genuinely just there to help you in any way, shape, or form. But I think, especially when it comes to social events post comp, if anything, like I think that competitors might just get a little bit overwhelmed, understandably so, but that's relative to where they're coming from, right? And sometimes they forget to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because if you're coming off the back end of a number of months where you were just eating all of your own prepped food and all your main meals, and sure, you might have still been going out to these social events and engaging socially, but you might have not been partaking in the food and beverage side of things, then I think that when it's post comp, and just remember, you like, guys, you are allowed to eat the entire time. Like we voluntarily choose to compete in amateur bodybuilding shows. And since the days of dawn, you've been the only person that's been in control of, how much or how little you do choose to eat. You are allowed to the entire time. But it's post comp where I think when people are coming off the back end of like, whoa, I wasn't engaging in any social events from like actually an eating or a drinking standpoint, to now, hey, this week I do have a birthday party that, I can go out and maybe I give myself permission to order one of the meals off the menu, right? And maybe have a slice of cake. But if you're used to eating, like, let's say 4 meals every single day, right? And there's 7 days in the week, that is 28 times that you are eating during the week. If you have one social event or 2 social events, hell, 3 social events that might replace one of those meals, the large majority of the time during the week, it's still fully in your control, because like the thing is, like, you end a amateur bodybuilding show on a Sunday night, the next morning it's Monday, everyone wakes up, you get back to it. The world keeps spinning. People get back to school, they go back to their jobs, like everything generally falls back into routine, like for the most part. But I think it's just these few little events that really catch people off guard. But that's where you just kind of have to, again, think back to be like, okay, during my past improvement season, how did I handle social events? Oh yeah, I calorie banked and I was so G with it. So just remember where you came from, and don't get too like fussed to be like, like there's too many things going on. It's like, you got this.
Yeah, those are great points, and there's 2 things there I want to highlight as well and talk in a bit more depth. Like, one is, I think, that point of reaching out that Damien mentioned, and 2, like what actually happens if you do overeat. Like, people can sometimes feel a bit lost afterwards and be driven by their innate reaction, almost like a knee-jerk response of, okay, I overate, panic mode, it's time to restrict again, etc. So going back to the prior point though, like, I definitely want to reinforce that people do have someone that they can reach out to. Like, often competitors will unfortunately leave their coach after their comp prep. And I can totally understand that if they don't find their coach supportive, or their coach hasn't been either supportive or being there for them and creating an open, friendly, supportive environment. But if that's the case, then if it's financially possible, then invest in a coach that is going to help you in that way. Or, as Damien said, like, have a go-to person, whether it's a friend or a family member that is understanding, and they can be there for you. Basically someone to talk to, because I think competitors often will bottle it up. They'll maybe out of shame, or like internal shame or self-perceived shame. And it's important that you do talk to someone and share with them how you're feeling. And especially, I would say, someone who does have the right knowledge and credentials and education to be able to help you with a step-by-step process to prevent it. I think the only like limitation with a family member is that there would be a great listening ear. And ideally you speak to someone like a family member or a good friend, but as well as a professional who can also help you too. I think that's the best combo for sure. But yeah, what happens if you do overeat? Like, probably the worst thing that you can do afterwards is restrict again, because it's going to be driving all the things that led up to that overeating in the first place. So I would, and people probably hear this a lot, and it's definitely easier said than done, but you really do need to just get back into normal routine and normal habits straight away after overeating. And like, you can even look at this through the lens of what's going to, if I stop the overeating, then there's often a fear of, okay, what impact is this going to have on my physique if I just get back to normal calories? But also ask yourself the question, what's going to happen if you keep overeating, like, and having uncontrolled episodes? What impact is that going to have on you kind of physiologically and mentally? So reframing things positively to being like, okay, this is my step forwards to be able to have control over what I eat and feel good about how I eat and feel good in my own skin, and try to almost stop those little variables that creep in around, oh, I'm going to be scared of what other people think of me, or I don't want to go outside because people will see how my body has changed, or I don't want to go to the gym because I look different and feel different in the gym now. There will be those little negative thoughts that creep in, but I think resisting those and battling against those from the get-go is really important, because if you allow yourself one little change in lifestyle or change in routine as a result of those negative thoughts, then you allow yourself to make accommodations to all of those things, and that maybe will kind of stimulate further overeating. So again, that's where it helps to really have someone in your corner. Like if you say to your coach, oh, I don't feel like going to the gym, I'm a bit self-conscious with how my body looks and feels right now, or there's this competitor who's doing such a great job, why am I doing such a bad job, I feel like I failed. Like those are things that are really important to voice out and to speak to someone about, and not just internalize them and keep them to yourself, because often in our own head they'll be self-imposed and they'll be just blatantly untrue, and you need someone there to kind of support you and tell you the truth, which is nowhere near as bad as what you might be conjuring it up to be.
Yeah. And I really like how you made that point of you don't look better or worse. You simply just look different, you know? And again, like it's so important to remember that the people that are actually, worth having in your circle, whether that is your friends or your family, or your partner and your peers and your colleagues, right? Like if they're genuinely good people, they don't love and admire and respect you even more just because you have less body fat on you. All right. So you didn't gain a whole bunch of extra like validation and approval from like these people around you. They should still love you for you, no matter, if you're 10%, 12%, 20% body fat, whatever it may be. Like they should have loved you initially in the first place. So understandably, we get into this headspace when we are in a prep because we're dialing ourselves into this very specific condition to, be subjectively marked by a panel of strangers on some given day and time. But guys, like that doesn't define who you are, and that shouldn't make it like worthwhile to actually go out in public and show yourself. I'm really, really glad that you made that point, Jack, because some people, they do feel as though they reach like this peak condition and this peak physique, and they're like, man, like people just aren't going to, maybe want to associate with me nearly as much if maybe I look a little bit different. It's like, no, that's not the case in the slightest.
Mm. Yeah.
Or they'll think differently, or they'll think less of me. No, that's not true. I think if anything, that's a mirror. That's like, how do you actually think about yourself?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think the point that I'd personally end on here is I think many people overeat or binge post-show due to those stresses, and the body can only handle so many stresses, so much cortisol input to the point at which something snaps. And for many people, that may be binging as a source of emotional release or as a massive dopamine hit to help kind of offset those stresses. So managing those stresses, which are often going to be psychological stresses, is super important.
Yeah. And it just takes time, and it takes a lot of experience too. And in full honesty, it's probably going to take, a number of those episodes where you're just like, man, like doing this, eating in an uncontrolled manner, like this is no way to show myself love or respect. And it does not make me feel very good. But you really have to just harness the power of your own mind and take back that control and tell yourself no. And something that has always really helped me is that, if let's say I am in a situation where I want to engage in some sort of behavior that acutely it's going to make me feel really good, I always try my best to make decisions in life, not based on what's going to make me feel the best right here, right now, but it's like, what is future Tiara really going to thank me for? So if you kind of reframe it like that, and if you ever are in a scenario where you need to make a decision, it's like, okay, what's going to benefit me, right here, right now, like acutely or chronically, like what's really going to, serve me in the long term? Try your absolute best, again, easier said than done, but to make a decision that your future self is really just going to look back and go, Thank you. Thank you so much. And ironically enough, thinking about your future self, that's also going to greatly benefit your present self too. So you get, it's a win-win.
I think it comes back to as well what you were saying, I guess what we were saying at the start around potentially having goal sets and having a mindset around, post comp, and, maybe it is important to set some, not necessarily boundaries, but allowing yourself to have a bit of flexibility and freedom, and what that may look like from an acute setting right up to a long-term setting, to again have that set you up for success essentially coming out of comp. So so you understand what is, I guess, required from that standpoint, but also giving yourself a little bit of flexibility around that time as well, so it's not, if something, if you do have a meal out and you do slightly overeat, it's like, okay, well, I've had that opportunity, I've had that meal, I've had that that time. Okay, now what are the next steps I need to take to be able to get back on track or get back towards my goals? And always trying to reframe with that. And again, it's that constant communication with the coach and with friends and family around you to help you get back on track if you need that support.
And I think time plays a huge factor in this as well, because we know that in comp prep, generally, their sleep schedules go a little bit whack. They often end up, waking up in the earlier hours of dawn, and there's just more to the day. But when you're actually in a prep, you have to think about all the things that you're doing each day for the prep itself, right? You're not just training or eating your meals, but you might be allocating certain times of the day with posing practice. Maybe you're doing a little bit of additional cardio, like you're doing a little bit of additional meal prep, this, that, and the other. So you are doing all of these different things during the day and strategically doing those between meals so that you keep your brain and your mind occupied, and hopefully like you're not thinking about food quite as much. But that's where I think post-comp, it's quite stark for a lot of people, because they're like, whoa, I've just gone from, feeling like this super version of myself, where I just had all of this time and I was so productive and I was doing all of these things that was like contributing toward this goal. But now I wake up in the morning and it's like, well, I don't really have a show on the near horizon, so I don't need to practice posing for 30 minutes every single day. Or, my amount of cardio time has been reduced, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's what really gets people. It's probably like the combination of boredom, right? Because they're like, I just have more time, I don't know what to do, combined with the hunger. They're like, oh, well, what would be nice to fill this time? Maybe I'll eat a little bit more. So that's where I think being really aware of, what does my day look like, and how can, again, you still use those strategies that you employed during a prep to keep your mind off hunger and keep your brain and your body occupied. What else can you do with that additional time? Can you maybe take up, some new hobbies? Can you go out for a nice walk and just enjoy a phone call, with a family member, catch up with a friend? Like, how can you fill those pockets of time so that the default isn't just, oh, I'm just going to eat more food to, just make myself feel better? Like, I think that's the biggest thing, is that like coping with emotions and coping with boredom, like food just can't be the default. Again, it's so much easier said than done, especially when you're hungry, but like you just have to try your absolute best to not build that habit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a point that we'd end on is having some go-to and like preordained or pre-organized strategies around distraction. So because when you're in the moment and the food is there, you have that craving, you have that almost uncontrollable urge to just stuff your face and overeat. And I can say it like that because I've had it many times before myself. You need some strategies that you can use straight away. Even write them down on your phone, put them on your fridge, whatever it may be. So it might be like taking a shower. Like you literally can't walk out of the shower and go to the kitchen when you're soaking wet and you're dripping everywhere. Take your dog for a walk, go outside for a walk, replace that dopamine from food with dopamine from something else. If you like playing video games, go play some video games. If you like reading, go read. If you maybe have your phone a friend, like have that go-to friend that you can phone up and be like, okay, I'm losing control here, distract me, stimulate me, I need a conversation right now. So have kind of those 4 or 5 things at the ready. The thing is, like, none of those things in the moment will feel more enticing than food. That's not necessarily the goal, because food is so unique in that sense. But it's just, the goal is for it to be just enough to get you over that hump of that urge or desire to eat. And then once that insatiability sensation has passed, you can then move on with your day, essentially.
Yeah, but I think those are fantastic tips.
Thank you.
Phone a friend. Feeling hungry? Phone a friend.
Yeah.
Literally. I've done that. I've done that many, many times. Jack, I still distinctly remember this was back in 2016 when like you and I had just met and we were at an event that there was like this really fantastic seafood buffet. And
I
I
remember
could
that.
keep going back and back and back to get all the smoked salmon in the world. But it actually does come to a point where if you're with someone who, you know, they're just there to support you and you can speak up to them, you can be like, listen, I'm starting to feel a little bit out of control. Like, can we just go for a walk? And actually getting yourself out of that environment. You know, that's one of the biggest things is that when people get caught in an environment, you know, what if they're just standing there in their kitchen and they're just opening up the pantry cupboards and looking in the fridge, like sometimes you literally just have to snap yourself out of it. And you're like, nope. And you just slam those doors shut. You get out of the kitchen, you get outside, you get yourself into a completely different environment where those things aren't even in your foresights. That just makes such a world of difference. But again, easier said than done, but you just have to be headstrong enough to just literally take those steps.
Mm. Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap up there on this segment of the podcast, and just want to let everyone know that if you are struggling, don't hesitate to reach out to us as well. Like if you don't have that go-to person for support, like we don't want to say all of this and then be like, yeah, good luck. Like make sure that I want to let people know that they can reach out to us either on our personal accounts or on our main TBD account, and we have links down below for that. So we just want to highlight that point. And yeah, I thought we'd end with something that we learned this week as well. So I'm happy to, considering I usually pass it over to someone else, I might go first, give you both some time to think about it. But I was at an event over the weekend, actually a bodybuilding show, and it was hosted in a complex with a casino. And I think it was my first time being in a casino, and it was a unique experience, like seeing, basically the way in which the choice architecture of how it's designed around food and like lighting, lack of being able to see outside, almost letting yourself get lost in the slots, because it was mainly kind of slots and pokies. And it would be weird because you'd walk somewhere and then you'd see this little nook and cranny with all these pokies and slot machines that you could just forget that the outside world existed. And yeah, it's quite sad, to be honest, that they design it in that fashion for people to get lost. Even toilets, like everywhere you looked, there would be a toilet, because I think they wouldn't want people walking too far and getting distracted from the pokies. So they would have a toilet at the ready so that you would walk 10 meters, go to the toilet, and then come straight back. And then you'd see like waiters floating around being able to serve people drinks and food so that they wouldn't have to walk somewhere to kind of distract themselves, which is unfortunate and sad. So a different mind game entirely than the post-show period. But I think, although I kind of knew that already, like there's the cliche of casinos wanting people to spend more money and how they design the casinos around that, but it was more visually reinforced to me over the weekend.
Wow, you are a special someone. That is really interesting that you walked into the casino, and for like, I think 99% of people there, they're there to be like, all right, am I going to win some money tonight? You're like, whoa, why is there a bathroom like on my left and my right? And you know, there's like, what, like again, like I'm like, I can so easily just engage in some sort of a very addictive behavior here and just completely lose all concepts of time in my entire life. That's very fascinating that, you know, you were able to like look at it from that angle.
Yeah.
The big question is though, Jack, did you gamble?
No, I didn't know. I knew it would be a lost cause.
You were just too perplexed. You're like, this place is weird. Well, that's why they say, you know, casinos, a lot of the strategies and the psychology around how a casino is architected, it's the exact same as social media. You know, you're refreshing pages. It's like it's like the slot machines, right? You go onto Instagram and like, it's like you just get drawn in and you have no reason to leave because you can go down so many rabbit holes and everything's so accessible, right? So it's very, very tempting on that front.
Yeah.
Spend your time, spend your money.
I might caveat off yours, Jack, because I've got one, I guess, fairly similar in terms of what you've learned this week that is actually casino related too. I was watching a TV series, Black Rabbit, with my fiance, and which is quite good at this stage. Anyway, they had a scene where a gentleman was sitting in a casino playing slots, and the waiter had come up to the the gentleman who was sitting there and asked if he would like a drink, and lo and behold, I was having a chat to my partner about it, around, I guess, the I guess how it works within America, from what I believe. I don't believe it's within Australia, but you can actually get free drinks as long as you are gambling within America. And they also, I guess, what this led down a bit of a rabbit hole in, I guess, researching it around casinos in America and things like that, is they don't actually have, or especially if I know within Vegas, they don't have clocks or the time posted within casinos, so people don't actually know what time it is outside. So, unless you're constantly checking your phone or your watch, then you don't really know what time it is. It could be 2 a.m. in the morning, but for all you know, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, I guess two little tips or two things that I'd learned off the back of, one, watching the show, but then deep diving a little bit more into that, was, you can get free alcohol as long as you're gambling within America, and you don't actually know what time it is as well. So you could be there for multiple hours and have no idea what time it is outside.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the more intoxicated you are, the poorer decisions you'll make around money. So it makes a lot of sense.
It's just crazy. Yeah. Just environments. It's nuts. Have you guys ever thought about that when you just walk into a mall as well? And that's what I think about for some people who work in malls with all the fluorescent lights. There might not be a lot of windows, if any, around. Like, you could be in a mall and you don't actually know if it's 8 a.m. in the morning or 9 p.m. at night, right? Because it's always just looking the same if you're not exposed to the, actual natural light for a number of hours.
What did you learn this week, though?
Wow, what did I learn? Well, I just learned 2 very fascinating things about casinos, I'll tell you that. But prior to having that knowledge, I did not learn anything about gambling. But this has definitely been the year where I'm just trying all the things. I want to learn all the things, learn all the new skills, be exposed to different things. And that's involved a hell of a lot. This year I've learned how to ride motorcycles. I've become an absolute wind addict and learned how to kite surf, this, that, and the other. But this past week, I actually learned how to slackline. So slacklining is when you tie like a rope between 2 trees and you try for your dear life to balance on that rope and climb from one end of the tree to the other without falling off the rope. So I actually learned how to slackline, and definitely can't say that I'm an absolute pro at it, but it's really, really fun. And, you can just get so persistent with it. You're like, no, come on. I can get 6 steps instead of 5, but there's certainly a technique to it. But that was a lot of fun. And that was just a really fun challenge to do on a Monday morning, is to learn how to slackline.
I mean, I guess wind is involved in that as well. You don't want it to be too windy when you slack.
No. And that's the thing. At the beginning of the session, when my friend and I started doing it, it was really calm, but then the wind actually started to pick up. So that definitely added a whole extra element of challenge. But it's really cool being able to do something like that. Not just learning a brand new skill, but something that you have to be so intentional on focusing on, because even if for a millisecond your mind darts off to something else, you fall off the line. Right. But really trying to absolutely hone in on your balance. It takes, a lot of just proprioception, and of course, just a lot of mental focus. And it can get pretty addictive. If you fall off, you're like, I want to go again. I want to go again. So maybe that can be a good alternative to people who are getting lost in these casinos, who it's like, come on, just one more slot, It's like, no, come on. I want to walk along that line one more time. I know I can do it. The persistence, determination.
Well, slacklining TBD championships and see who's the best out of all 3 of us.
Hey, I wonder, what's the best, the optimal body composition for someone who can slackline?
The slacklining dietitian. There's one for you.
Some niche
there. There we go. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of the TBD podcast. If you did enjoy it, whatever podcast channel you're listening to this on, or if you are watching on YouTube, we would much appreciate if you could please leave us a 5-star rating, subscribe, leave a friendly comment. We love all of that. And if you would like to reach out, you can simply Google the Bodybuilding Dietitians, or, you can go over to our Instagram page at the Bodybuilding Dietitians. All of these links will be down in the show notes below. Or if you want to reach out to us personally, you've got Jack Radford Smith, you've got Damian Cox, you've got Tiara Nelson, right? But again, you can access all of those links in the show notes below. But we much appreciate you tuning in today. And until next time, adios.
you.